How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another episode with RC Rewired. As you can see, we are at our local hobby shop again. Going to be doing another bench day. We're going to install a couple of these unbranded aluminum axles. The thing that caught my eye with these was that they were under $35 for the front and rear set. And then you can see I went ahead and painted the diff covers to get that nice Betty green to it. We're also going to go ahead and throw on these Treal shocks, and they're just the same as the stock shocks, just nice aluminum bodies, and then you got the green to match the Betty. All right, let's get into it. So, to get the shocks on, if you have not done it before, first things first, you're going to need to take the wheels off. Now, once you have the wheels taken off, you're going to go ahead and lift up the body. Now we've done that, we're going to need to remove the top and bottom screws on all of the shocks all around. Now, one thing you're going to notice when you take off the screws for the stock shocks is they are actually pivot ball screws, so the pivot ball is built right into it. Your new shocks are not going to be using that same kind of pivot ball screw, so you'll just use the hardware that the new shocks come with to install them. Well, there we have it, shocks installed, and they look really nice. I am a big fan. Now, something I realized right off the bat, right after I installed them, I'm gonna have to pretty much take them off anyway. I gotta take off all the lower screws in order to get the axles off. So that is our next task, and we'll get into that now. All right, screws removed. So we're gonna go ahead and swap around these axles, and in order to do so, you're going to need to remove your steering linkage up front. You're also going to go ahead and remove all of your links underneath in order for that to come out. And we'll go ahead and just drop out all of those little hexes, and so we don't need them right now. We'll go ahead and get the axles off, and we'll go from there. There we have it. Axles are uninstalled. Now, in order to disassemble your front and rear axles, they are a little bit different from each other. The front axle, you're just going to go ahead and remove your steering knuckles on either side. We'll take the diff cover off, and you'll see we'll be able to remove the inner axles after we do that. The rear axle, on the other hand, we'll have to remove a couple screws at the ends, and that's going to remove a bearing. And then we'll go ahead and take the diff cover off, and we'll be able to get the axles out of there. So we'll go ahead and get into that, and I'll speed up the video a bit for you, and you'll be able to see exactly how I do it. All right. Well, we can move this out of the way as we're not going to need it for a while. Let's go ahead and start with the front axles. I already took one of the knuckles apart. It comes off like that. You get your inner shaft out. And we will need the little bearings that are inside that. So we'll take a little tool, get in there, and pop those out. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and remove the diff cover. There we go, now we have the exposed axle and the gears inside it. One thing we're going to need to do in order to remove that worm gear is we're going to need to remove this little set screw that is in this guy right here. So we'll go ahead and do that. Alright, so what we're left with here inside the axle housing is going to be your worm gear's pinion, and then you're going to have 4 bearings inside, one that's sitting on the worm gear shaft, 2 that sit either side of the pinion gear itself, and then one that's going to be on the other side of the worm gear shaft that's pretty hard set in the plastic diff cover. So we'll need to pry that out. The other thing that gets forgotten a lot is at the very inside of that diff cover there is a little kind of a bushing. It's a teeny little O-ring, And I have noticed when in the past I have not installed that O-ring, it does not perform nearly as well. I mean, especially with the metal diff covers, you'll get some really loud squeaking, at least in my experience. So reinstalling these is really just going to be exact opposite of what we just did. Sometimes getting the pinion portion in here is a little difficult because you have these two little bearings that sit either side of it. There we go. I'll admit this is the most difficult part, is getting those middle shafts to seat down into the axle housing in the actual pinion there. So I was considering throwing on these brass knuckles, which is why I took the bearings out of the plastic knuckles. But now that I am this far, I think I'm just going to continue using the plastic knuckles for now, because I don't really want to add a bunch of weight to the Betty. So yeah, I think we're going to continue with the plastic ones. And this bearing, which came out of the diff cover, we'll put into the new diff cover, just like that. Alright, well, we got the one knuckle on, so let's go ahead and get the other one on there as well. Alright, now to put the worm back in. And get the shaft back on. Ha! I just found something. Remember when I mentioned that I thought the O-ring was gone? It's actually sitting on the tip of this shaft where it's supposed to be, but more often than not, it falls off and sits at the very back of the diff. That's where I'm used to seeing it. Huh, interesting. Good to know it's still there. Well, now the diff goes back on, or the diff cover, and we get all 6 screws in there. Alright, we went ahead and got those screws in there. Now you'll notice for the front end, the top 2 screws are for the servo tray, so we haven't added those yet. I also went ahead and noticed that I put my knuckles on backwards. Maybe you guys caught that before I did, but I went ahead and fixed that as well. Let's go ahead and do the rear axle. Now this one is only different in the aspect of instead of having that split with the axle shaft, it is going to be just a longer solid one, and you've got a couple bearings that are inside here that are held in with a couple screws. So let's go ahead and take those screws out. I'll show you what that looks like, and then we'll get the rest of it installed. Alright, we got those axle shafts taken out. We can go ahead and remove those bearings, and of course it's going to be a little difficult. There we go. I am just surprised to see there is a little bit of grease in these from the factory. The deadbolt and my C10 had absolutely zero grease in it when I first opened it up. So kind of a nice little thing that Axial is finally starting to do on these. All right. So pretty simple. We'll go ahead and get all of this installed into that axle now. Bam! There it is. Front and rear fully together installed. We just got to get them on the truck now, get the wheels back on, and we'll be good to go with the upgrades for the day. And then we'll go do a little testing. So let's go ahead and install these new aluminum axles back onto the C10. Well, alright, we only got one thing left to do, and that's to put the wheels back on. Now I went ahead and put the brass hexes on there as well as the pins, and that's only because they're kind of a pain to install on camera, so just went ahead and did it off camera. Well, I'd say that looks pretty darn good. I am liking how those shocks look. I really like how those axles look. Now, to be honest, these axles felt identical to the Treal axles and to the Hot Racing axles, and these are $35 for the front and rear. So my guess is these are the same axles, they're just unbranded. I would do yourself a favor if you're interested in getting some aluminum axles. Go on to eBay or follow the link down below and pick up a set of these. I mean, how can you beat $35 for front and rear? And they look nice, they fit good. I can't complain. Well, I think all that's left, aside from putting the body clip back on, is going to be to give it a little test. Let's go rip it out in the backyard and see how it does. Well, here we are at our backyard trail course. Gonna go ahead and give it a little test. What can I say about these aluminum axles? Well, they are identical to the Treal axles, to the hot racing axles, really any of those branded axles. These are the same ones, they're just unbranded. I would definitely go for them if you're looking into some aluminum axles as an upgrade. They're only $35, rather a little less than $35. Unbelievable. That's under the price of a single front or rear coming from hot racing or Treal. And they are just as good of quality. They literally are the same thing. I couldn't find much of a difference between these and the branded axles. Now, the Treal shocks, they're pretty self-explanatory, really just simple aluminum housing stock shocks, so not much to say about those other than they look nice. All right, well, I think that's gonna wrap it up for today's video. Thanks for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed. Until next time, happy crawling.